welcome to episode 2 of Mind the Gaps. I'm your host, Jeremy. Well, I was really happy at the positive response to the first episode. Actually, more people listened to it than I expected, and if you like what you hear, please tell your friends, because this is just the beginning. I've got a list of a lot of stuff that I have not experienced, and I'd love for you to come along, maybe send some email for feedback, things like that. We'll get a little more interactive maybe in the future. But anyway, with this month being October, it's the month for scary monster movies. I decided I needed to fill some of the gaps I have in that genre without really resorting to watching anything schlocky or truly gruesome. Scary movies, they often walk a fine line between sickening and obscene, so picking a movie that I haven't seen as well as one that might not be morally compromising can prove to be a difficult task. I think I've made a good decision with my selections for this episode. I don't want this to become a habit, but I will not just be doing one movie for this show, but two, much like I did with the last episode when I reviewed Frankenstein and Young Frankenstein. My reasoning this week is much the same as last week, because these films are related in a lot of ways. The Blob, from 1958, is a classic horror film about a murderous blob. The title itself is pretty on the nose. The Thing, from 1982, is more of a modern horror movie from a master of the genre, John Carpenter. And I have seen neither of these films before. Now, a quick Google search for both films basically pits them against each other. Who would win in a fight, The Blob or The Thing? I honestly don't know who would win. I guess I might have an opinion after I screen both films. I guess we'll see. So, what do I know about these films? Let's start with The Blob. I don't know anything about The Blob. In fact, I didn't even know that classic tough guy actor Steve McQueen was the star. I only found that out after I looked it up on IMDb to find out when the movie came out. But I do sort of remember The Blob as a concept, and it goes back to when I was in elementary school. My kids, they've inherited my love of the library. While we homeschool, they don't get to experience the school library days that I did as a child. They still like to come with me to the local library and check books out on a variety of topics. Right now, my oldest son is obsessed with manga comics, my younger son is reading books by H.G. Wells, and my daughters, they're completely into the Little House on the Prairie books. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with classic movie monsters. Well, I had never seen any of the films. I, along with a couple of my friends, Jason and Steve, were obsessed with a particular series of monster movie storybooks that the library had. They were the Crestwood Monster series. They were bright orange. They told the tales of monsters like Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, King Kong, and of course, the Blob. These books themselves sort of have obtained cult status among my fellow members of Generation X. A quick search on eBay finds some of them going for over $100. So when I was a kid, all the big names were constantly checked out by my friends and I. But the Blob, that book only got checked out once in a while. I know, I checked it out at least once, but I have no idea what was written in it or what the story is about. Years and a lack of love for the Blob has erased it from my mind. What I do know is the Blob moves slowly, but never stops. It may eat people or electrocute them, I don't remember. The plot line's a complete mystery to me, and I can't wait to solve it. I'm in the same place when it comes to John Carpenter's The Thing. Now recently, this film has become the subject of a lot of chatter. On the internet, among millennials, among kids my son's age. Why? Because of its relationship to the wildly popular Netflix series Stranger Things. If you haven't heard of Stranger Things, it's a love song to everything from the 80s. And among those things is the film, The Thing. There is a poster for the film in one of the characters' bedrooms, and the creepy soundtrack is straight out of the John Carpenter playbook. That show loves The Thing so much that another character is watching it on VHS during a brief scene and discussing the special effects techniques being used. I imagine if Crestwood were to make another monster book, they would pick the monster, the Demogorgon, from Stranger Things as a subject. So what do I know about The Thing? Well, not much at all. I know that it's set in a cold locale. I think Antarctica or Alaska. I'm not sure. I know that the star is Kurt Russell and he has a glorious beard. I know that for one of the effects they used bubblegum melted in a microwave. Thanks, Stranger Things. I know that John Carpenter probably did the soundtrack as he did for most of his films. If not all of them, I don't know. I have very little knowledge of the Carpenter catalog. In fact, there's a couple other of his films on my list. What's really interesting to me is that for some reason, a studio executive thought it was a good idea to remake this film in 2011. Another interesting tidbit, The Thing is a remake of the original film from 1951 entitled The Thing from Outer Space. I only found that little piece of information from my search on IMDb. Such a great resource. The Blob actually also got the remake treatment in 1988. I guess remakes come in cycles, and we're just in the middle of a longer cycle, huh? Every movie is getting remade now. But that's a question for another day and another podcast. I have some movies to watch. Where's my popcorn?
Beware of the blob, it creeps and leaps and glides and slides across the floor, right through the door and all around the wall. A splotch, a blotch, be careful of the blob. Beware of the blob, it creeps and leaps and glides and slides across the floor, right through the door and all around the wall. A splotch, a blotch, be careful of the blob. Beware of the blob, it creeps and leaps and glides and slides across the floor.
All right, that of course was the very, very silly theme song over the opening credits of The Blob. Very, very fun, funny, kind of sets the stage for what I believe, and I can't quite figure out. I'm pretty sure this was just camp, and it was not meant to be taken seriously. I couldn't quite figure it out while I was watching it, but after thinking about it and after seeing it, I'd imagine this is what would qualify as a silly drive-in movie that teens would go see in the summer, eat some popcorn, throw stuff at each other, make out, whatever else happened with teens in the 50s. I do like that Steve McQueen looks decidedly average. He has that everyman quality in actors these days. They all look like models. This movie itself seems like it's another example of doing a lot with little. Practicality is necessity, which we all know is the mother of invention. The colors are really rich, and I think this could be because it was restored by the Criterion Collection. It's available on Hulu, this particular version of it, and it's really beautiful. I think a significant portion of the dialogue, though, was recorded after filming. Maybe it's just for the first scene. Maybe it was done on purpose. I don't know, but I'm not sure. I think this might be a trademark of the films from this era, but they don't waste any time getting to the action. Less than 5 minutes in, and the hero is faced with the enemy, even though he doesn't even know it yet. These days, most films spend 20 minutes on exposition before you know what it's about. The doctor in the film, he looks a lot like he could be Gregory Peck from To Kill a Mockingbird, his big brother. He doesn't have that gravitas Peck has in To Kill a Mockingbird, but this guy is just, just one of those things I noticed. But it took me a while to sort of put my finger on it, but I finally realized who Steve McQueen reminds me of, and everybody's going to laugh because it's totally a different actor, a different acting type, especially. He looks like Anthony Michael Hall. Now, bear with me, okay, hear me out. He doesn't look like the young, awkward, 16 Candles, Breakfast Club Anthony Michael Hall, but the older, Dead Zone on the USA Network Anthony Michael Hall. And I did a little research when I figured that out, and I looked it up, and I saw that after doing some research, I discovered when the Dead Zone started production, Anthony Michael Hall was only 4 years older than when Steve McQueen was when The Blob was shot. I think he was 32 or something like that, and and Steve McQueen was 28. So interesting. Just, I don't know. Interesting to me, at least. Hopefully it interests you. I don't know. There's this interaction, like I talked about, this fine line they walk between being camp and being serious. There's this interaction with a police officer that's pretty comical, but it's not comedy, it's just funny. The acting overall leaves a lot to be desired, but it makes it even more difficult to determine what genre we can place this film into. Is it a horror movie? Is it a monster movie? Is it a comedy? I don't know. But it's interesting to think about the perspective and point of view from which these movies were made. This was before we had done any exploration in space. I think Sputnik from Russia had been sent up around this time. The stars, they represented the unknown. Anything could happen when a meteor fell from the sky. Space represented a frontier of mystery, and with mystery always comes fear. They're like tied together. And the unknown itself is vast. The human mind cannot yet grasp the depths of the universe, and even now in 2016, we're still barely scratching the surface. The unknown is fuel for the imagination, and I think that was the ultimate inspiration for folks behind most older science fiction. Now, I think this is where it becomes comedy, because they finally, after a few minutes, they reveal who the villain is, the moment of the big monster. It made me laugh. I'm pretty sure that was their intention, and I think one of the unfortunate side effects of living in a world that's becoming more cynical and jaded by the minute is we lose that fear or response to things that are supposed to inspire it. I think this was probably meant to make you laugh, because it was silly. It just kind of rolls out at you, and it's like this rolling blob. Very, just silly. There's also, and this is just a little aside, there's an entire scene dedicated to chess. One of the deputies in the police department is discovered to have a small chess set in his drawer, and later on it's revealed that he uses the department radio to call the other police department and play chess long distance with them. So even before the internet, people were trying to connect and compete with each other. And they would find interesting and unique ways to do so. So we do too, you know. All right, I know, and take this with a grain of salt. This is a pet peeve, and it could be just intentional, and I'm not kidding it. Maybe I just have no sense of humor. I was a film major in college. I was only in film school for about a year and a half, but I remember a lot of things kind of stuck with me. I've internalized. I had two phenomenal screenwriting professors, Skip Battaglia and another man who is no longer with us named Eric Timmerman. They told me and my fellow aspiring filmmakers that one of the biggest dialogue mistakes a writer can make is having characters constantly refer to each other by their first name. It's just not natural. My wife, she only calls me by my first name once in a while, either choosing to use a pet name or nothing at all in conversation. She knows me, I know her, there's no need for formality. Calling one by the first name, while informal, is still a formality when you first see them during the day or when you are passing them in the hallway at work. Needless to say, it's awkward to constantly refer to someone by their first name all of the time. And the screenwriter for the Blob apparently didn't have teachers as good as I did. Because McQueen, he's referred to as Steve by every other character in the film. Always. Steve, 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 Steve. It just, it bothered me. It's just clunky. It's a clunky way to handle dialogue. And the dialogue already was clunky. But hey, all right, now this isn't Shakespeare. It's the Blob. I think that's why it's so easy to forgive the greater sins of poorly written dialogue and outright silliness. There isn't a shred of irony in the performances for the most part. And Steve McQueen, he seems to be sincere in his role. It's just funny as a 28-year-old playing a teenager. I don't know. So the final act, it starts in a movie theater when Steve drags his friends out to convince them that there was a monster that could kill them all. These kids are all at a midnight spook show where they're showing a film called The Vampire and the Robot. I did a quick Google search after seeing the poster and was kind of bummed to discover that the poster was just a mocked-up parody of the poster for the film Forbidden Planet. That's another film I haven't seen, actually. Anyway, all right. So this film was produced in 1958, only a little over a decade after the end of World War II. The use of the air raid siren as a warning signal to the town, it probably would be considered in poor taste if done today. There were genuine fears of nuclear war in 1958, and to use the air raid siren as a plot device, it seems incredibly insensitive, but there wasn't much sensitivity in that area. It was a different